So we've talked about new, and we've talked about old and new over the last 2 days. So our next session, in case anyone had worried that we'd left our content makers and our content innovators behind, don't you panic. We have a fantastic session now where we're bringing together established and new media brands, how they work now in this new media landscape, how it all works together. So I've got a fantastic panel to get us through that as well. And we have a great moderator to lead us through it. So I would like to invite first, we'll have, who should we go for first? Let's invite Alex Brownsell, who is the editor of M&M Global and our moderator for this session. Next up, we have David Pemsel, who is the deputy CEO of The Guardian. Woo! Come on, we're near the end of the day. Let's lift it. Come on. Woo! We have Marcus Rich, who's the CEO for Time Inc. UK. Woo! We've got Alexis Ohanian, who is the co-founder and executive chair of Reddit. Woo! We've got Jimmy Maymann, CEO of the Huffington Post. Woo! And finally, but by no means least, we have the man in the Del Monte suit, Matt Teeman, who's the commercial director at EMEA for Bloomberg. Woo!
Hello, can you guys hear me? Fantastic. Well, 29 minutes and counting, and 5 of the world's leading content creators on stage, so you won't hear too much from me. The sands of this industry are constantly shifting, and it's no surprise to anybody out there to know that publishing has gone through some tough times lately. The picture is constantly evolving, and nobody knows this more than Jimmy right now, who, in case you hadn't heard, Verizon has just acquired Huffington Post parent company AOL for $4.4 billion. So it all goes on, it all goes on. What I would like to put to the panel, and starting with you, Matt, and working this way, put simply, can publishers survive and thrive in this digital media environment?
I think absolutely. I think providing they continue to innovate, providing they continue to invest, providing that they continue to hire the best talent, maintain the best talent, I think they have every chance. I think the interesting thing for me is that everyone, including the panel, I think we all come from slightly different businesses with slightly different backgrounds, and we're all from a slightly different start place. So I think, from a Bloomberg perspective, we don't necessarily have a legacy publishing business like one or two other on the panel. So, we're a financial data business. We have a paid wall in the terminal, and the users that we have there, and everything that we do on the media arm now is to absolutely support and promote Bloomberg across TV, print, digital, and events. So we've got a different set of challenges in building that audience and that business than one or two on the panel.
Yeah. Jimmy?
Yeah, I think obviously we do. Obviously, HuffPost last week had its 10 years anniversary. It feels like we've been around longer, but the reason for that is obviously, we're in this big paradigm shift. Things are shifting, and as we just heard, if you understand and embrace those changes, and obviously are moving fast on those things, then I think there is a golden age of content and journalism on the other side. We are in the middle of kind of where everything is up in the air. We have created one of the models. We've built 214 million unique visitors on a monthly basis globally on HuffPost. So it definitely is possible to build an audience with content you create, with content you curate as well. So I think I'm very bullish on the space. I think it's very important to understand the new things that are happening. If I look back over the 10 years that we've gone through, you've basically rapidly have 5 things that has disrupted the way we do business. First we had blocking, which really led to our business. Then you had search. Understanding search was key. If you didn't understand that, your content wouldn't show up. Then you have social media that came and still is very important. And on the back of that, you have the instant messaging platforms with Snapchat Discover coming in, playing a role there suddenly, which is a player you didn't expect to see there. And now you have video and mobile coming in, and when I say video, it's because what we're seeing now is, of course, the social media platforms are changing the algorithms, the search is being changed, so they favor things that has video in it. So as a content production company and as a publisher, you obviously need to think about those things. But if you think about those things, I think there's a future for content and for publishing businesses, obviously.
Okay, thank you. Alexis?
Well, at Reddit, we've had an interesting perspective on it all because we started very simply to essentially send lots of traffic to content sites. And we did that for a very long time. And then a few years in, we allowed users to start creating their own content, these self-posts. And today, the result is, Reddit essentially sets the agenda for what is popular. What bubbles up there on the front page ends up being reposted or yanked all over the rest of the web. And so I think what's been particularly fascinating in the 6 months that I've returned has been our push into creating original content. If you look, all the things we've done in the last 6 months, launching a podcast, original video, newsletter, and then comment embeds, have been to embrace the fact that so many content creators and publishers rely on Reddit to create content, and we just want to make it as easy as possible for that content to get in front of as many people as possible. But it's going to be interesting. I think if you're not focusing on high-quality content, you're going to have a really not pleasant time in the next 10 years.
Absolutely. Marcus?
I think it's definitely not survive, it's definitely thrive. I think there's never been a better time for mag brands. I really like Bloomberg, The Guardian, Reddit, etc. But what I really love is the passions that I have outside of the day job. And I think if I spent 5 minutes with each of you, you would have a passion that you spend a disproportionate amount of your money on, that you're very passionate about, whether it's cycling, whether it's wine, whether it's buying 1959 Sunburst Gibson Les Pauls, whether it's buying horses, which I definitely not recommend getting in, it's very expensive. And at the heart of that passion is a mag brand. And I think what digital has allowed us to do is extend the content. If you looked today on Twitter, not only would you have worked out that Andrew Strauss hasn't invited Kevin Peterson back in, the best South African ever to play for England, but also that Cycling Weekly were talking about the Youre d'Italia, and it's allowed us to expand our content and use the data we have from that content to get far more insight into what our consumers are doing. So it's definitely thrive.
David?
I think there's so much is talked about disruption, whereas I think all we ever see at The Guardian is pure optimism. I mean, I think we've gone from the 9th largest newspaper in the UK to the 3rd largest in the world. And that means that we've embraced every single digital opportunity as an opportunity rather than something that perhaps might cannibalize the old businesses. And as a result of that, as I suppose, as Jimmy was saying, it's been from desktop and then to tablet and then to mobile. And now obviously we're exploring all the opportunities, whether that be in different markets or off-platform, publishing straight onto social networks, etc. And I think in the end it does come down to quality, and it comes down to trust, and it's creating something that your audience values. And so many times people talk about, you've got to make a full advantage of what happens off your platform. And unless you are trusted and unless people actually care about what you do, then you're never going to take full advantage of every digital opportunity that presents itself. So it is a thriving, wonderful period where good quality brands have embraced those digital opportunities, and you can do it. And if you don't embrace those, then it's horribly disruptive and you can go backwards very, very quickly.
Yeah, thank you. We've got a fabulously diverse panel from a couple of centuries worth of heritage in The Guardian to 10-year anniversaries coming up here with Huffington Post. I'm interested to know, does the heritage of a publishing brand really matter anymore? Is it something that audiences latch onto, or in the age where we're all finding content in other places and through our social media streams, for instance, does it matter? And could I throw back to you, David, for that one?
Yeah, I mean, we're 194 years old. We'll be 200 years in 2021. Finally got our first female editor after 194 years, very progressive, which is brilliant. It would have been nice to have. I think what you do is when you work in these businesses, you get a stool and you become male. That's what's represented up here. But I think 200 years is about not ever resting on your laurels. And I think there are brands of a similar age to us that perhaps haven't taken those opportunities and haven't quite worked out what the legacy actually means. But when you look at across the globe, I mean, there's the Mail Online, which we shall dismiss. Then it's the New York Times, and then it's ourselves. And I think that is because at the heart of our business, we're ruthlessly independent, we're private, which means we don't have quarterly results. And as a result of that, we've been able to play it long. And we've been very, very, very confident about those bets that we've had to make. It is disruptive. It is, the burden of a 194-year-old brand resting on the commercial and editorial shoulders is a heavy one. But I think it's about being open, it's about being progressive, it's about understanding your audience, all the tenets that all good businesses have. But it is about having a really good, open attitude about how to take this fantastic legacy brand and turn it into something that is genuinely global, open, and digital.
And Jimmy, could I come to you then for the flip side, perhaps?
Yeah. No, I actually have to agree with that. I think that is one thing that we don't have. You know, we're 10 years old. We have built a brand, but obviously we've started from zero and had to build it up and put something into it. Whereas, you know, you have legacy brands like New York Times, The Guardian. And, you know, when we started, obviously, we didn't think we would be able to get to where we are right now because of kind of the relationship they had with their audience, because of the brands they had built, and because of the purposes they had. And I think the only reason why we've been able to do that is obviously because we have been a digital first player. So a lot of the legacy stuff we've not had to deal with. And obviously that is, you know, we can see that. Everyone that wants to read about it can read the New York Times Innovation Report. You know, it's not that these guys don't know what's going on. They do know what's going on, but making the changes, embracing those things and really move the business forward and really kind of unlock the brand in this new digital world and social media world, I think that is where some, and I'm not saying New York Times because they can still make it, that is where some brands I feel and publishers I feel will fall short and will not kind of cut it and make it into this new area that we're seeing on the other side. And then I do think, you know, that is partly because of the traditional legacy, but it's also because for more than 100 years they have talked to people. They haven't really talked with people, which is really what media is now, right? It is kind of an ongoing two-way thing, and I think that is a very, very different way of thinking. But to go back to your question, I think it's very, very important to have a brand, and I do think that's one of the things that, you know, a lot of these legacy businesses have that we don't. We're still working on it. We do have a brand, but we don't have a 200-year brand.
Absolutely.
I think it helps. I definitely see it as a liability for organizations. I was talking to you earlier. The Guardian, I noticed The Guardian on the front page of Reddit within the first few months of launching. They were already one of the top submissions. And I was like, how's this American site full of links to this English newspaper? It's because of quality back in 2005. And there are plenty of publishers, though, that get complacent because they think about all the Pulitzers that they won, and they start thinking that the people who won them were just the New York Times or the fill in the blank. I'm not just picking on the Times, but that this understanding that the brand for 100 plus years mattered more than the individuals. And what the last 10 years has shown is that the individuals, the journalists, are the brands people actually care about, the things they actually follow, and always were the ones doing the real work. And the folks who have not embraced that and sort of always assumed that their homepage would be the front page people opened every morning are still living in a world where we had limited choice, right? You only had, it cost a few $1 million to start a newspaper or a magazine or a radio station or a television station. And today your content, no matter how amazing it is, has to compete with a 12-year-old's photo of her cat. And that's very humbling, but it's true. And that's something that the successful legacy brands have been able to get on terms with, but many unfortunately haven't.
And to emphasize that, I mean, I think it's amazing how every piece of digital disruption presents itself, or anything that's seen to atomize your content, it always does come down to the really simple answer of quality. And with 650 journalists, of which, you know, people will say, you know, how big is that? Do you need that? Why is the newsroom so large? Because in the end, that's what we do. And if you can't create that quality content and you can't create something that is genuinely valued by the audience and therefore shared and participated in, then you don't have a business. And so quality is so important.
And I was just going to add to it, I don't think it's just exclusive to publishing brands. I think it's true of any brands. There are people in the room who manage brands, and you know, there are legacy brands that need to adapt because they've been around a long time, and there are new kids on the block that need to almost earn that. And I think it's a question really of you know, toggling between the two depending on how long you've been around.
I think I was looking at the archive actually, and we had 7 titles that were launched in the 1800s, still around, still successful, and I think that level of trust, authenticity, the way you've built up a reputation. I mean, we just launched last week a site called Equo, which is your ability, digital entry system for equestrian, so that you can enter online for dressage, show jumping, etc. It works for the consumer, it works for the people who hold the events from an efficiency. But it's through the trust of horse and hound that you've built up that it gives you the opportunity, and the consumer is saying, yes, you can play in this space. You know, you have the trust, and you have to manage that. As a media owner, you have to constantly make sure that you're delivering against that legacy and building on that trust.
I went to a very nice party at Bloomberg in London a
Yep.
couple of weeks ago to mark the launch of Bloomberg Business, which is a very nice new platform for all of your content. But
Yep.
I suppose what's interesting now is the extent to which people are coming to publishers' own platforms versus who is seeing the content on social networks, on Reddit, in other places. Does it matter to you as a publisher where people are seeing your content?
I don't think it does at all. I mean, I think it's just part of the social being the
Commercially as
example.
well?
Sorry?
Commercially as well?
Well, I think it's part of the ecosystem now, and you have to embrace that as from a Bloomberg perspective. Our mission, if you like, is to allow our users, our audience, to make smarter, faster business decisions. Whether they choose to consume content through, the social platforms or on a website or through our TV channels or through events, we don't care, providing that the content that we're providing helps them do that. And particularly in the social, we've got an app business handle which is proving to be a very, very effective way of talking to them. So no.
Yeah. Alexis, I know you've got a strong opinion on this.
Well, I mean, the way I found out about, so Facebook is obviously working with some partners to publish directly within Facebook. The way I found out about it was these publishers reached out to us and said, hey, can we also publish directly into Reddit? Because we know how much traffic it sends us, we know how influential it is, we would like to do that too. So it was very interesting for me to see that shift. And it takes a certain amount of forward thinking to be that agnostic. But the reality is people are going to, you want to get your content in front of where people are, right? If 100 years ago you were gonna launch a newspaper to target Romans, you wouldn't put all the newspaper kiosks in Milan, would you? That just doesn't make sense. Where are people going to start their mornings? It's on Facebook, it's on Twitter, it's on Reddit. And this was a very, very bold move it is a promising sign.
Jimmy?
No, I think it's a move. It's a big wave that you can't really stop because this is the way consumers are consuming our products, right? So we can try to stop that, but that's obviously not going to do us any good. And I think if we look at over the last 3-4 years ago, you had kind of 80% of your traffic on site. I think it's probably the reverse right now in broad numbers, that we have kind of like 20% of our traffic on site and the rest is really distributed, right? So obviously you need to find out what that means for your business. You also need to kind of think about what it means for your brand. Is your brand because we just talked about brand and the importance of brand, is your brand going to stay as important? How do you make sure that when they come across your content on their site, that it's clear that this is from Huffington Post or The Guardian or the New York Times and not just Facebook news or Snapchat news. And obviously that's something you have to think about. And then the other part of it is obviously the monetization part, which of course you need to make sure that when you go down this path, you understand kind of what it means for your monetization and that you are able to do good enough deals with those platforms so you actually get your fair share, because otherwise you sit in a situation where you're losing out on the brand because you're not controlling the brand, and monetization is going downwards because they're not sharing enough of the monetization on the content that now lives on their platform. So I think those are important conversations, and obviously we have those conversations with the social media networks that are going down that path, because we want to make sure that it's a sustainable and viable business route for us as we explore that.
Yeah, absolutely. David?
I mean, I think if you take The Guardian's aspiration to be the most influential news brand in the world, that makes you have to go where your audience is, which is primarily now off-platform. And even a year ago, we would go and talk to the platforms and say, what's the return path, and getting ultra paranoid about putting links back because that allowed us to monetize. But even just a short time, 6 months, 12 months, you then start saying, well, look, if the audience is there and you've created the appropriate framework around the discussions around data and optimization and what ad network it's associated with and ad serving, etc., then I think you just have to have a slightly more relaxed attitude that if someone wants to consume your content within Pinterest or Flipboard or Facebook, etc., I think that's in recognition of the fact that they want to read your content, which is primarily the biggest task and greatest task of all. I suppose the other thing about platforms, I think the one that we probably do need to debate is that mobile, I think, is great. At times 80% of our content is being consumed within mobile, and then trying to create quality experiences and quality engagement and, dare I say, ad serving within that is horribly complex. Mm-hmm. And so as much as we love the big browser numbers on 127 million browsers, etc., that's all great. But the monetization of mobile, increasingly probably for everyone in this room, remains a real challenge. And I think that if you want, if you're trying to always focus on the consumer, littering it with huge amounts of ad formats is the thing that's going to push people away.
Yeah.
I mean, I quite liked, I don't know if this is true, David, but somebody mentioned it to me that The Guardian had a concept called the Mullet Strategy. Short at the front, long at the back.
Yeah. I haven't heard that, but it's a good one. Yeah.
Which is, which I like. I was just again looking. So Vicky, if anyone's watched Geordie Shore, Vicky's had an incident in a nightclub, and of course which is a mobile strategy. It's been tweeted by Now magazine that drives you straight to the gossip cam piece. So I do like that concept, which is again, as David said, it's harder to monetize mobile, but short at the front, long at the back, which is then you can migrate people to your other platforms for a deeper story and monetize it that way. So if you didn't invent it, you have now.
Great, thank you. That's catchy. Native advertising obviously Editorial has been around for years and years and years, and it's interesting that some publishers have been bringing editorial and commercial teams closer together, and it's something that actually has caught out legacy and new media organisations, The Telegraph in Britain, BuzzFeed recently. If you do bring editorial and commercial teams closer together in the interests of producing better content for advertisers, what impact does that have on reader trust? Alexis?
Well, we're really lucky because our users are our editors, right? Our Redditors. And so the advantage that native advertising has been for us is we have hundreds of thousands of different communities on the platform. And so when a brand wants to come to us and say, we want to do a 10-part series on slow cooking, seriously, there's a slow cooking community, r/slow cooking. We can go to that community and say, hey, help us make this content. And so not only, one of the big challenges for so many content creators is finding an audience. You kind of roll the dice and hope that whatever you make, people will like. We can actually build content with these communities and be totally upfront with them and say, this is brought to you by so-and-so. And because it's authentic, I know that's the buzzword, but it's the truth, they love it. And there's no line to be drawn because we don't actually produce, there's no need for that wall because we ourselves are not producing journalism.
David, does there need to be a line?
Yeah, I mean, we launched Guardian Labs, nearly 3 years ago, and that was in response to very senior clients and many chief execs of media agencies saying, we want to be able to create engagement in this multiple platform world, and sticking a banner here and an ad block there is just not working. And we've tried to create as much sophistication in this as possible, is that if a brand wants to genuinely create a compelling narrative in an authentic way to our audience using every digital tool, we do that 24/7 in multiple markets all around the world. And therefore we have some incredible tools and skills and understanding of data to tell compelling brand stories. That does not mean in any way that you procure our trust or buy our influence. And Alan Rushbridger always says that you only lose your integrity and trust once. And so we never do it, but you will be amazed by how many times we will get asked to, oh, come on, would you not just write that? Or would you not put the logo there? And in the end, people come to us because of our trusted environment and our incredible audience, and you just cannot compromise that. And there are brands out there, such as EE and Unilever and GE, some of these great clients around the globe who have completely understood that. And these deals have been seismic, in the millions, and there are some brilliant test cases out there of how to do it properly. So I don't believe anyone should compromise it. It's just a line you should never cross.
Can I ask a quick question? Yeah. I would love to know what you all think. BuzzFeed recently got called out for deleting articles that one of their brands wanted them to get rid of because they were critical. Do you think that compromises their integrity? Because my sense of it is it hasn't really affected their growth at all.
I mean, we did our big Unilever deal, and at the same time, there will be editorial team members who are looking at the way in which Unilever may or may not be doing things with greenwashing in some other part of the world. That's what they do. And at the same time, Keith Weed and others completely recognise that there is the church and state, and you do not. But just because Unilever pay us some money does not allow me to trot around the corner and say, don't do that.
I think at the end.
Sorry, Matt.
I was just going to say, sorry, Marcus. I was just going to say the most important thing is that the audience isn't stupid. So even if you feel that you've got away with it, for want of a better expression, you won't have, because the audience will decide, and ultimately you will, at worst, lose that reader, user, whatever they may be. At best, you'll damage that trust and all the things, all the heritage that you've built over however long you've been in business. So it's you're on a high to nothing, really.
I mean, exactly the same. I think it goes back to the previous question. One of your huge competitive advantages, the loyalty and trust you've been with your consumer. So at peril, start to ignore that. I do think, though, it's really interesting that we've come on after the new breed, because I think what there is a different relationship with content. If we bring exclusive Charlie XCX content with the NME and Austin, Texas as the sponsor, I think everyone wins. So I think it's a different, but at no point can you make, in my opinion, the reader feel like a fool or look like a fool with losing the integrity around content and walk away from the deal if that was going to occur.
I also think it really depends on what it is you want to be, what you aspire to be. If you want to be a trustworthy news source and not about entertainment, then I do think you need state and church, right? I don't believe that you can have editors that are writing for our advertisers and at the same time criticizing them with the left hand. That's obviously never going to work. So I think, the Chinese wall is important. I think it's, as soon as you start to kind of cross that line, I think, you're going to lose out in the long run. You might be able to get away with it in the short term, but I do believe that the audience will see they're smart enough to kind of figure out kind of what it is you're doing. So at HuffPost, we're doing exactly that. We're trying to we've built HuffPost Partner Studio, which is doing that. And I do think it's important. It's an important revenue stream. I do think that it's one of the formats that done the right way, where you actually, create great content programs for the advertisers. It's actually something that we see on our side. It's not the same engagement that we have on the editorial creative, but it's not far off when we do it right. And I think from that perspective, it's a great way of creating value for the advertiser, and obviously for us, we're 100% advertising funded, so we need to find new ways of monetizing that audience, and in a way where they feel that we're doing it in a respectable way. There's a trade-off. They're getting something, and they're not. It's not stealth marketing, right? It's not that we're projecting something that we're promoting on the other hand editorially.
I was just going to add to that. I think one of my observations is, or our observations is actually to really understand, because it's a real sort of buzzword at the moment. There isn't really a brief that doesn't come over that hasn't got some sort of custom content or some sort of native element in it. And I think we're being, as publishers, being employed to understand, we understand our audience and how best to communicate with them. And I think it's really pushing it back sometimes and saying, well, if that element is something that you want to consider, what are you actually trying to achieve? Because just because it's the sort of, the big thing at the moment doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be, what you need it to do. So I think there's an element of that to consider.
Well, I'm conscious we are running out of time, and I'd love to throw out to the audience for some questions for these leading content creators. Could I just see if there's any hands out in the audience? We have one over here, please.
Hi, James from Now Native, one of the Emerge companies. David mentioned monetizing mobile content and the challenges there. What needs to happen to effectively monetize mobile content in the future?
Look, I think it's okay to say that we're all learning. I think if you're at Facebook, I think Facebook is a mobile company now, and it's just at the heart of everything they do. And I think that we as content creators have to think about what the role of mobile is. I mean, in our app, our app has been downloaded, our new app, 2 million times, average dwell time, 51 minutes, and it's a really deep, immersive, rich experience within the app. But 2 million is not representative of our entire global audience. And so I think we've created these really unique experiences within the app, which somehow I think we've got to translate to the more the mobile browser. But at the same time, those ad formats can make you weep as they become so intrusive. So I think data plays a massive part in terms of maybe driving yield through personalization, location, etc., which is potentially where the opportunities are. But I think at least I'm confident that agencies and clients are all in the same space, that if you're trying to create a premium mobile ad and content environment, we've got to do that together. And though Facebook have got that monetization cracked, the newsfeed is cluttered and arguably potentially too much ad serving, of which we couldn't do for any money. So I think we've just got to kind of work it through together.
If I can add to that, I think it's really two things here. It's the formats. I think personally, you know, there's not a lot of search happening on mobile, so that's a problem. The other thing is the banner on mobile. I don't know if you tried it. It's very annoying. Yeah. So obviously, you know, we need to have better formats. You know, video. We talked about video. Video is one of the things that works really well on the mobile. So as kind of we grow out kind of content to that end, and then also I think native, we just talked about in-stream advertising is ways that we can monetize it better. And then, you know, as an industry, of course, you know, the advertisers need to understand the quality and the scale that we can deliver on the mobile, and they need to start buying it. But I will say it's looking promising over the last year. What we have seen is that it used to be a quarter of the desktop CPMs. It's now half of the desktop CPMs. So at least, you know, it's moving up. We're closing the gap. It's still a huge gap, but it's being closed.
Just to add, I mean, I think Lindsay mentioned it in her section, Lindsay Patterson, which is also a requirement from the industry to deliver measurable data that starts to marry true cross-platform coverage, deduped with engagement data, how mobile plays a part for all of us, actually, and one of our challenges moving forward. So we've got really good data that proves ROI for advertisers across all our platforms.
Have we got one more question? Anybody? Over here in the corner. Might need to get a jog on.
My name is Alejandro. I'm coming from Market Medios in Colombia. Basically, I wanted to ask you guys a question. I've noticed all of the panel talking about online and mobile, what you guys are doing about it. But I have a question. What are you guys are doing for the, you know, the regular paper method, your newspaper, your magazine? Are you guys not focusing as much in maybe selling ads in those magazines or newspaper and moving everything into digital?
Obviously, some of us haven't got newspapers, so I'll go there.
We don't have newspapers.
No, I think that in the last 2 years, we have essentially aggregated our cross-platform audience from desktop, mobile, print, and aggregated that as an audience sale rather than the platform sale. And because in the end, you know, with our cross-platform reach is 16 million, and we've got circa 175,000 people a day reading our newspaper. So I think it's beholden upon us to be able to take that very valuable and very engaged audience in print at that size, integrate it within our cross-platform reach of 16 million, and make it easier for the agencies to be able to buy that, whether that's certain segments. But when we have sold it cross-platform, you know, the OTS is better, the price is better, so agencies have really responded to that. And I think over time, you know, as we've been talking about off-platform reach versus protecting circulation, it's not to say that print isn't important, and there's a certain amount of authority and influence that comes with having a physical product, but in the end, it's going one way. And any organization across the globe that's spending its time trying to prop that up while your audience primarily is in Facebook is going to end up in deep trouble. So it's a matter about doing both. And then obviously there are outliers. Saturday is fantastic. Sunday remains very strong. And so there's all sorts of nuances about how one might manage it over time. But you go where your audience is.
I'm pleased you asked a question about print, because there was a study a couple of months ago, Ender's Analysis, which did a piece that said it's a slightly two-tier print market. And actually at the older upscale end, print is in growth. So, you know, magazines like Country Life, 5 ABCs and growth. So I still think there's a really important and appropriate market for print. And I saw a couple of days ago that there's actually starting to be print launches. But the skill, as David said, is that print is a component of a total cross-brand reach. And actually, in my opinion, the best solutions come from using all the elements of the platforms rather than the single element, of which print plays an absolute passionate part and delivers against.
Yeah, and I actually wanted to use this opportunity.
Alexis,
we're going to announce we're launching the Reddit newspaper. I'm just kidding. We're not doing that. I'm sorry.
We can help you with that.
That really is time up, because I think Jeremy's about to throw us off stage, which would be a shame. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in thanking our fantastic panel. Thank you.